So I'd like to tell you about this and about my own experience with it and the experience of hundreds of my students, where I've seen a really huge change the moment that they started to learn a little bit systematically. Now, before we get to the system itself, I would like to mention two other aspects of language learning which I think are really important. But just before that, maybe a quick introduction. My name is Lydia. I'm from Slovakia. I work with languages professionally as a conference interpreter for 6 years. That is now a thing of the past because I have another project, and that is language mentoring, where I help people learn languages. And this is also why I'm having this talk here, because of having the experience of seeing how it works for other people too. So in language learning, I think we're all kind of trying to find a shortcut in a way, right? To make it faster, to get the results quicker, with less effort. But my question is it really possible to find a shortcut in language learning? See, for me personally, I learn a new language every 2 years. And I find this time the perfect time to get to a comfortable fluency level where I can use the language comfortably. And I do this by spending about 1 hour with the language a day. I rarely ever learn more than 1 hour a day. Now, if I wanted to make it shorter and learn a language in 1 year, what would I do? I would double the amount, right? I would learn 2 hours every day, and I'm sure I would get to the same result faster. Now, if I wanted to do it in half a year, what would I do? I would learn 4 hours a day, right? And if I wanted to do it in 3 months, I would probably be a full-time language learner, 8 hours a day, which I personally cannot imagine, but I know there's people out there, and it's impressive if someone can learn a language like that. But this is actually the only shortcut I can imagine in learning a language. I can have a shortcut time-wise, but not really effort-wise, right? Because it just means I will get to the result in a shorter time, but it just means I will have put more effort into it in a more intense way. So when it comes to language learning, I don't believe there is really a shortcut in the amount of effort you need to put into it. And this is not just my idea. I also asked Vlad, who I'm sure many of you know. He has this really impressive video on YouTube, seen by millions of people, where he speaks in 20 languages in a really amazing accent in all of these languages. And he speaks 15 languages really well, 8 of them on a C level. Like, he's a really experienced polyglot. And I asked him, how long did it take you to learn one of your languages? What was the shortest time? And he told me that in order to get to a very good level in Russian, it took him 3 months, but he was learning 5 to 8 hours every day. This was for a very specific purpose. I think he needed a good level of Russian because of university studies or something like that. But this is basically it, right? This is the whole shortcut. You can do it in 3 months, but if you are prepared to put a lot of work into it, because language learning doesn't work like, I don't know, you cannot have a shortcut in just seeing the word once and finding this perfect method of always remembering it forever and being able to use it. I personally need to see the words in different contexts, at least, I don't know, 7 times, so that I can really know the word and be able to use it myself actively. And I need to have spoken many times. So that's the one thing about shortcut in language learning. Just wanted to make that one clear. Now, the second question when it comes to language learning is about the methods. The big question, of course, what is the best method to learn a language? And I will not reiterate what has been said in these conferences before by many speakers. I think we all agree that there is not one universal method to learn a language. It depends on what you prefer, what type of learner you are, whether you want to work with books or you're more of a tech-savvy person and you like apps. Like, there's so many possibilities today, especially with the internet. The opportunities are amazing. But I think there is one thing which is universal when it comes to methods. And it's one question that I always ask my students when they want to learn a language. I always ask them, what do you need the language for? And I have some students who have this situation in their life. They married, so they're Slovaks, and they married a Slovak-Hungarian man, and now they have a child together. And they speak together with the husband, they speak together in Slovak, but the husband wants to speak in Hungarian with the child. Okay, this is something that happens a lot in Slovakia. We have a huge Hungarian minority. And it's okay for the wife, but she wants to at least understand what's going on. I mean, she wants to know what the father is saying to the child, what the child is replying. So her need to learn this language is to just understand. It's purely passive. And in that case, what I recommend to her is just work with the passive ways of learning a language. You don't need to practice speaking. You don't need to go through the most difficult things in language learning. All you need is a lot of listening and reading input so that you understand. You understand what's going on, right? I mean, she needs to make sure she understands the word roots and with Hungarian, the endings, obviously. But she doesn't need to give a lot of output in her learning because she just needs to understand. And this works also the other way. For most of us, we want to learn a language in order to speak it, right? We just don't need to just understand. We want to be able to speak the language. And in that case, what we need to work on a lot and what we need to spend a lot of time with is practicing the output. However, many people take it the wrong way and they think they're learning a language when they're just doing this. Just having an app, maybe, and spending 5-10 minutes with it a day, having fun, enjoying it, and thinking that's the only thing they have to do in order to speak the language well. And then they are surprised why they don't after a few weeks or months doing it, but they haven't really practiced speaking at all. They haven't found any methods to speak. So this is something I always tell my students, and they find it the most revolutionary thing in the world. I find it pretty obvious, stating the obvious there. But I tell them, look, if you want to speak a language well, you'll have to speak a lot. And they go like, so this is why. After many years at the language school, because of course the average way of learning a language is you attend a language course, which is okay. But if that's your only contact with the language, and it happens once or twice a week, and there's 10 of you, or even more, how much of the time have you spent speaking? I mean, not all the lessons are about speaking, so maybe you end up speaking, 3-4 minutes a week? Now that for sure is not enough to learn to speak a language, and this is why these people struggle after so many years of attending language courses, because they haven't practiced the thing which gets them to the results they want to achieve. So I think this is the universal question in asking about methods. And so if we agree that you will need a bit of patience to learn a language, and you will need effective methods that will get you there, which are relevant to your goals, then this is the hard part of learning the language, I believe. But the good news is that there are two things which make it a lot easier to get to these two. And first of them is finding ways how to have fun with the language, how to enjoy the learning process. And the second one is finding a system. I believe these two things make it so much easier to learn a language and to spend all the time that is necessary to learn a language and to go through all the methods which are important to achieve our results. Now, as for fun, there are some people, that's a very small minority of people, who get really excited about learning a language, like really excited. And there's many of them sitting in this room right now. I mean, if you love language learning, if it's your hobby, then it makes things a lot easier, doesn't it? You don't need to force yourself into it. It's something you like. And many people are actually jealous of polyglots because they say, well, you like it, you enjoy it, so it's easy for you. Now, I see this a lot with polyglot stories. Like the typical polyglot story I hear when I meet many of you is I had, 10 years of that language at school, and it was really boring, and I was bad at it, I didn't like it. But then, for some reason, I needed to learn the language really fast, and I found a way which was more fun, and suddenly it worked. I spent like 3-4 hours a day with it. I didn't even mind because it was so much fun. And this is where it clicks somehow, and this is how a polyglot is made, I believe. You kind of find your way, you find it amazing, you have results, you're motivated, you learn another language, you test your methods, and next time you know it, you come to one of these events and you have a lot of flags on your name tag, and it's great if it works for some people. But there are some people, of course, who are not that lucky to have language learning as a hobby, or they haven't found that method yet which would make them super happy, and that's why they need to apply different principles. Now, just one example of a method which can get you really excited. I just have to share this with you because I learned it recently about a friend of mine, Lucas Bigetti, who is not here today, but maybe you know him from other events. He found like the most amazing method to learn Russian, and he did it in this way. He realized he wants to learn Russian, and so he added 500 people on Skype as friends, Russian-speaking people, and 100 of them accepted him, okay? It's a pretty good score, I think, right? 1/5. Now, what he did is he opened a chat window with one of them and wrote hi in Russian, привет, and the person replied, привет, как дела? Like, hi, how are you? Now, Lucas copied this and put it into a chat window with another person. And that person replied to the question, say, I'm fine, thank you, how are you? What did Lucas do? Copied it back to the first person. And in this way, he had conversations with people, with strangers who didn't even know about it. I mean, how ingenious is that, right? And in the meantime, he was translating everything on Google Translate, and he was making sure he understands what the guys are talking about. And after a few days, he did this for several hours a day because he loved this method. I mean, who wouldn't? This is a great method. And he discovered it himself, he invented it, kind of, and then he just kept writing and writing, and these things kept repeating themselves, so he understood more and more. He started writing some replies later on. This is how he got into Russian learning. And since then, he's applied a lot of other methods, but this was the one method that clicked for him. So I found it really amazing, and I think this must have been the feeling of having the success, you know, with a language which you thought you would never learn. So anyway, there are people who find fun in language learning, and it's super easy for them then. But then what do other people do who don't? Well, the result or the answer, in my opinion, is finding a system. I believe that if you find a system in your learning that kind of helps you get to the results step by step without a lot of effort, because you planned the way in advance and you just follow these simple steps every day. You don't need to put a lot of effort into deciding what you do and how you do. You just have to think about it at the beginning. So what does it mean to learn with a system, to learn systematically? First of all, you need to think of what you need most. So this is the question of, so what methods will I use? Do I need to speak the language? Do I need to just understand? Am I okay if I don't write very well? Am I okay if my spelling is not perfect? Like that's my case, for example, for French. My spelling is not that good. I was always aiming to have a conversation in French, so I spent a lot more time practicing speaking than I did writing, and I'm okay with that because I don't need to write in French. If I write to someone, they understand what I want to say anyway. The second thing is, how much time are you willing to spend with your language? And this depends, of course, on your possibilities and how motivated you are, how fast you want to do it. I personally recommend spending about 1 hour a day learning the language. But mostly when people start with it, I say go for 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes, and try to get to 1 hour. But in my experience, if you put 1 hour into it a day, you see the results in a few weeks or 1-2 months, and that's what motivates you. That's what keeps you going, seeing these results. If you do it just, you can do it 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, but then it's more difficult to see the improvement and to have the motivation to continue. Then the next question is, when do you want to learn? For me personally, I love learning in the morning. This is the best time for me, and mostly if I don't make it in the morning, right after waking up, it's really difficult for me to find the time during my day. So I found that the morning is really the best. I try to get 1 hour in one piece, but of course you can do half an hour here, half an hour there. It depends. It's very varied. You can adapt it to your personal life and preferences as well. And finally, how do you motivate yourself? How do you keep yourself motivated? This is an important question because learning a language by yourself, that's the hard thing about it, right? You do it by yourself. There's no one else telling you what to do. You need to decide to do it. And if you don't have a strong motivation or a motivation that you can remind yourself of or that keeps you going, then it's difficult. So at the end of my talk, I'll also give you a few tips of how I motivate myself and what works for most people I know. And hopefully you can get some interesting inspiration from that. As I mentioned, my experience is not based on just my language learning, but also hundreds of other people. With this language mentoring project, I try to help people learn languages by themselves. I always tell them, I will not teach you the language, I will teach you how you learn the language by yourselves. And this way, I can help people learn a language I don't even speak. So they learn Korean or Italian or Croatian, whatever other language, because it's really about finding the system, finding a few methods, and just sticking to them for long enough time. Trying to find the system in it, fun, intensive contact, and effective methods. That's all it takes, basically. And so I'll show you 2 examples of the learning plans of some of my students and why I think they are very good examples. So for example, in this case, we have priorities. So I always tell people to go for 3 things to concentrate on in a given period of time in order not to do a little bit of everything and not seeing the result. And so in this case, it would be listening, reading, and speaking as the 3 priorities. And the methods that this person decided to do was podcasts, TED Talks, and audiobooks for listening, and ebooks for reading, and then having session with a tutor and self-talk, which is a great way too, where you talk to yourself about your everyday life, and you get a lot of output, even though you don't get a lot of feedback at that time. And so how many times a week do you want to do it? Well, in this case, it was like 5 times, 30 minutes. That gets us to 2.5 hours a week. 5 times 30 minutes again, and let's say 2 60-minute sessions, which takes us to 7 hours of language learning a week, which I think is a perfect plan. If you get 7 hours of language learning, you will definitely see your improvement easily and week after week, because this is how language learning works. I'll show you a more ambitious plan as well. So this one is of Paul, who was learning Spanish, and he decided to make speaking his first priority. Having a language exchange with someone, self-talk, and a paid tutor, so you can combine, of course, various methods. He decided to learn vocabulary with the gold list method, which is very interesting. Many of you know it. It's basically writing words in a notebook and rewriting them every 2 weeks systematically. For grammar, he did some online grammar exercises and listened to podcasts, YouTube, link, etc., etc. You can see what the plan was at the end of the week. So the plan was about almost 12 hours a week. That's pretty ambitious already. That's almost 2 hours a day. But Paul did great because he was very motivated to learn, and he actually outdid himself in every area. We like to monitor our learning in a very specific ways, like using charts. And in this case, so the plan, you can see here, was about 12 hours. But every single week of that learning period, he managed to get more of the language practice. And if you look at, for example, vocabulary was extremely, extremely rich in the amount of time that he spent. And the best thing about this is if you make a plan and you set out the priorities, you will not forget about the most important things. In this case, it would be maybe speaking. So we see speaking is blue. Every single week, Paul got enough speaking practice, so that made sure that he would improve his speaking as well. What happens if you don't have a plan is you can easily forget about these more difficult things, because it's more comfortable to, spend more time with Duolingo or Memrise or whatever app you use for fun. But I think you should always ask yourself, what is the main goal I want to achieve with the language? And if it is speaking, you should make sure you also have some speaking practice in there. So what are the benefits of learning systematically? Well, first of all, it helps you with your willpower. Now, why do I have a picture of Mark Zuckerberg in here? Probably some of you know that he's famous for always wearing a gray shirt, right? And he has a wardrobe full of gray shirts. And he says the reason for that is he doesn't want to spend time deciding about stupid little things, such as what am I going to wear? And so he takes the gray shirt, which is the same, and that's what he wears. And this applies to language learning as well. I don't want to decide every single day what I'm going to do and whether I'm going to do it. I think this is what takes so much mental energy, and it just kills the whole motivation. Because let's say you want to learn a new language and you're excited about it, and you buy an Asimil Hebrew book or a Teach Yourself book, and you put it on your bedside table, and you're excited in the first days, right? You go like, wow, I want to learn, and you spend 2 hours with it, and you're super motivated. But then what happens? The next day you go like, today I'm a bit tired, I'm a bit busy, this is a busy day, so maybe tomorrow. And tomorrow someone calls you unexpectedly and just, interrupts your plans of learning when you wanted to learn. So if you don't have a plan to learn on specific days or specific parts of the day, if you don't tell yourself, I'm going to spend 20 minutes with this book every day, then most probably there will be more important things coming into your life which will interfere with your plans. So I believe if you make it systematic, that helps your willpower a lot. Because your poor willpower has to decide every single day if you want to do it. If you have a system, you don't. You just follow the plan. I believe that helps a lot. The second thing is what I've mentioned already. It helps you with the most difficult things where it's just outside of your comfort zone. You don't really want to practice speaking because you feel like an idiot at the beginning. You cannot say many things and you stutter, and you know how great it feels to say things in another language, but with this language you're just a beginner, it feels so difficult. But if you have a plan and you say, okay, I'm going to do 3 sessions of speaking every week, then that makes it a lot easier. So you get to do the more difficult things as well. The third thing is it helps you create time in your daily schedule. So if you're systematic and you say, okay, I need to listen to podcasts, let's say half an hour every day, you will find that time because you want to fulfill that little plan, the little commitment you made to yourself. And so when you go to work, you think, am I going to use this time listening to music, or will I put on a podcast? And in this way, you can easily collect these minutes here and there, and by the end of the week, you can easily have 12 hours. You don't even know how you gathered them. The next thing is it keeps you motivated. I think many of you know this screen where it shows you a streak in an app. Well, this one is Duolingo. There's other apps as well. It shows you a streak of how many days you managed to learn without a break. And that feels so great, right? And you want to keep it. You don't want to break it, miss 1 day of learning and get to 0, especially after 465 days. By the way, this is not mine. I have never gone that far. I borrowed it from a friend. But it's really motivating, so why not motivate yourself with other things as well? Why not say, I will finish this book by the end of the month, because if I read 4 pages every day, this is what will get me to the end of the book by the end of the month. And this works really well if you motivate yourself with other things, not just apps. Also, I think it makes language learning a bit less intimidating, because language learning is scary when you look at how many words you need to learn and what topics you need to cover. And at the beginning, you feel you don't know much. So it is quite scary, isn't it? But again, breaking it into little steps makes it a lot easier. A lot of other polyglots recommend breaking it into semantic groups. So, for example, first I want to learn how to order a meal in a restaurant. Then I want to learn how to buy a ticket at the station or something. I personally, that has never worked for me, these little semantic achievements. Instead, I break it into the time that I spend with the language, because I know if I put enough time into it, I will get to the results finally. So I'm always happy about the achievements I've made regarding the time I had spent. And finally, I think that being systematic in your learning also, I think it makes us feel better in general. I see this with so many people. If they start learning systematically, they suddenly feel they have more energy, or they are more organized, more systematic in other areas of their lives. They suddenly start eating better or sleeping better, or they do fitness or whatever. It just motivates you to work on yourself in many other areas. I think this is a great thing about language learning, which we should use to our advantage. And now, as I promised, I will also mention some methods to help you in your learning system to motivate yourself. And these are just some of my favorite ones. There's, of course, many others. Obviously, it's difficult to learn a language by yourself. So if you find a learning buddy, someone to learn with, that makes things so much easier, doesn't it? If you have ever tried learning a language with someone else, and that doesn't mean you have to learn even the same language. They can learn a completely different language on a different level. You just need to be in contact and talk about it to someone. Know that if you missed your activities and didn't feel your plan, then someone will know about it, because that makes us more accountable. There are many Facebook groups, there are challenges that you can join. I think any group that you can join to learn with someone, or find one person, can be someone at this conference. Just make sure that you are in regular contact to check on each other. I think that helps tremendously in the motivation. The second thing is keeping track of your learning. I showed you the Excel way of keeping track, where you can have charts, and you can do that, of course. But you can do it in a very simple way of just having a simple sheet which you draw on a piece of paper or in a calendar, and you make sure you note every day what you did with the language. And that is such a wonderful feeling at the end of the month when you look at it and every single column is filled. I think that's really rewarding. And this is what you can be happy about in the language learning process. You don't need to wait to see the language results. You can see the results of doing activities which get you there step by step. Third tip I have for you is make some regular reminders. It can be a post-it note on your computer, this will be the triggers which will remind you, okay, it's time to learn now. I don't have those because I always learn in the morning, but if you cannot find a regular time in your schedule, I think it's great to have these situations such as when I open my laptop, it reminds me of first doing something with an app, or maybe read a blog post in the language I'm learning or something like that. There are apps that can remind you of these things, that can ring at the time, I don't know, every X hours, or when you come home from work, etc. And I think they work really well because, again, they help our willpower. I use these a lot for a different thing, not for language learning, but I bought one of these tables which enable you to work sitting or standing. So you can, movable desks, I think they're called. And I'm always lazy to stand up and spend a few hours standing. So what I do is I have an app which reminds me, stand up now, every day, twice, in the morning and in the afternoon. And I made a commitment to myself that I will only skip that if I have a really good reason. Like, okay, I'm really sick, or I don't know, I have a terrible headache or something, which doesn't happen very often. So when that comes, I just push the button and the table goes up and I work standing. And I think the most difficult thing about it is the decision to do it. So if you have someone or something remind you of that and make that decision for you, I think that helps a lot. One more thing is giving yourself a deadline in learning a language. Because if we buy a book and we say,